everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Jennifer Lee, and I work for the City of Burlingame, and I am one of the co-hosts for tonight's program. Joining me tonight is Alexandra Shaw from the City of Sunnyvale, who you'll hear from later tonight. And along with our co-sponsor, Vaska, and our instructor, I want to welcome all of you to our class. So before we begin the program, I'm going to go over some housekeeping. First, all attendees are muted by default. And secondly, the instructor will be pausing periodically for questions. And we highly encourage you to ask any questions that you have. The first option is to use the raise hand feature, where I'll call upon you and you can unmute yourself to ask a question. And the second option is to type in your question in the Q&A, and I will go ahead and read your question to the instructor or respond directly in the chat. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on Vaska's website afterwards. First, I'd like to give a brief background on Vaska. Vaska is a special district that represents the interests of 26 cities, water districts, and private water companies, all of which purchase wholesale water from the San Francisco Regional Water System. Vaska member agencies collectively serve over 1.8 million residents and 40,000 businesses in Alameda, Santa Clara, and San Mateo counties. Their goal is to ensure high quality supply of water at a fair price to the member agencies and their customers. Consistent with that goal, Vaska provides a regional water conservation program to support agencies in improving their outdoor water use efficiency. Outdoor water provides the single biggest potential source of untapped savings, where reducing outdoor water use through water efficient plants and innovative techniques can help conserve water to ensure that the future water supply needs of our communities are met. And so Vaska has a few water conservation programs to help you save water. The first is a Lawn Be Gone program that provides rebates to customers of participating water agencies for replacing your lawn with water efficient landscaping. And the second is a rain barrel rebate program that provides rebates up to $200 for the purchase and installation of rain barrels. And with that, I will turn it over to Alexandra to talk about some conservation programs at the City of Sunnyvale.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexandra Shaw, and I work for the City of Sunnyvale in the Environmental Services Department. Tonight, I'd like to tell you about the rebates we offer for replacing lawns and plants that require a lot of water with drought-tolerant plants or permeable hardscape. Doing this can earn you up to $1 per square foot of rebates if you are a resident of Sunnyvale. We also offer rebates for properties that connect a closed washer machine to a gray water irrigation system for up to $200. For more information on this, please visit sunnyvale.ca.gov/savewater. The City of Sunnyvale is also offering compost to Sunnyvale residents at our Smart Station. This is available Monday through Sunday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with your own mask, shovel, and container. So if you are interested in that, please, come on by Monday through Sunday. A new addition to Vaska is the Smart Controller program, which provides instant rebates and heavily discounted pricing on the Rachio 3 irrigation controller. This controller can be operated on your smartphone and normally retails for $280. But through this program, customers of participating water agencies can purchase a controller for $100 plus tax. You can also look out for Vaska's new rainwater rebate program, where you can receive an additional $300 rebate for creating a rain garden. Furthermore, Valley Water is also offering a rebate program where you can replace your lawn with a low water system. You can receive $1 to $2 per square foot in rebates, and you can apply for rebates or efficient irrigation equipment through the links in the chat. And for more information on that, you can go to watersavings.org for more information. Additional information, including videos and resources that Valley Water offers, can be found at the links provided in the chat. And you can also report water waste that you see or find by emailing waterwise@valleywater.org. If you enjoyed tonight's program, we invite you to some of our additional upcoming webinar classes. Here's some that are coming up. We have a build your own laundry to landscape gray water system coming up next week. And the full schedule can be found at bayareaconservation.org. Furthermore, if you're looking for additional resources on water efficient landscaping, please visit bayareagardening.org at the WaterWise Gardening website. This site supports residents in water efficient landscape renovations and management. Thank you so much. And now I will hand it over to Jennifer for an activity.
Thanks. So before we get started, I'm going to launch a couple of poll questions. So we kind of want to get a sense of, who our audience is tonight. And so our first question is, do you plan to remove your lawn yourself or hire outside help, such as a landscape architect, contractor, etc.? And then the second question is, how likely are you to replace all or part of your turf lawn? Are you very likely, somewhat likely, not at all likely, or maybe, you don't have a turf lawn and you're just here to enjoy, learning about native gardens? So I'll give it, see people are voting, and once I end the poll, I'll share what folks are feeling. And by turf, I mean, oh, good question. Live grass or fake? What do you think, Juanita?
I am not a fan of fake grass.
So we'll include fake grass as well, or artificial turf. All right. 5 more seconds for anyone else who hasn't voted. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So, all right, so it looks like for the first question, we've got almost half of the people are planning to hire outside help, okay? And about 23% are DIYers. And yeah, another third of you are not sure. And then for our second question, oh, great. So we have over 52% of attendees saying they're very likely to replace all part of the turf lawn. So that's great, you're at the right spot. And then another third, somewhat likely. And we've got a small percentage of people who are not at all likely or not applicable. So yeah, great. We'll screenshot these numbers and then see how they compare after our workshop has concluded. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you all to our speaker. So tonight we have Juanita Salisbury. Juanita has a PhD in biopsychology from the University of Florida, as well as a Bachelor of Science in Landscape Architecture from West Virginia University. In 2009, she established her own landscape architecture company after working for commercial and residential design firms. Her focus is on California native plant pollinator habitats. And in 2016, she established the Primrose Way Pollinator Garden, the first of 4 pollinator habitat gardens in Palo Alto. Her focus is to research and relay information on these habitats, as well as to explore opportunities to install more of them. Please join me in welcoming Juanita.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. All right, let's switch screens here. Okay, escape. All right. Find the other presentation. That's the one we want. Slideshow from the beginning. All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to talk tonight about lawn alternatives for beginners. So everything from like the super easy thing to do all the way to maybe taking it to the next step and doing more design with plants and things. So I, as Jennifer mentioned, I am a California licensed landscape architect, and I've been doing this for quite some time now. And I've sort of evolved my career into doing more of these habitat restoration gardens. And you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, where I often post pictures of the various species that I see. I also have a YouTube channel, Primrose Way, where I show some of my techniques. So we have a number of gardens here in Palo Alto. If you want to see native plants in a variety of situations, how they're doing, we have actually 5 gardens. The Island Drive Garden, the Arcadia Place Garden, Hopkins Avenue, and along Embarcadero Road, we have the Gwynda Street Pollinator Garden, and the first garden that we ever did, the Primrose Way Pollinator Garden. And our current project we are working on now is to connect these 2 gardens via a corridor with the strip of ground between the street and the sidewalk. There's quite a bit of land. And in this stretch, we think there's about 17,000 square feet that we can add for native plant habitat. So overview of what I'm going to talk about tonight. Form follows function. So that's my design mantra. And really it's what you should be thinking about when you're trying to make good decisions about what to do. We're going to talk about how to get rid of your lawn, and then some lawn alternatives, options for professional help, and then maintenance. And I do like to feature various denizens of the wild that I see in the gardens all the time. Here's a beautiful dragonfly in my own home garden. These guys are predators, and they're just this beautiful blue-green color. You know, creatures like this is what will inhabit your garden when you plant natives. So let's talk about form following function. What does that mean exactly? That means, how are you going to use an area? What is its actual function? You're going to maybe walk someplace, sit, plant, play, dine, play with the dog, you know, a number of different activities for the outside. And do you need a lawn for these activities? You know, there are, you know, obviously a couple of different ways to get through areas, you know, boardwalks, and then, you know, speaking of forms. All right, so in terms of what I mean by function-based design or function-based decision-making for optimizing outdoor water use. If we consider outdoor irrigation, that accounts for most of a home's water use. Lawns can use up to 50% of what you're using outside to irrigate. So consider really what the function is of a lawn. What are they actually used for? You know, here in this picture, I'm showing there's a patio in the back, and there's only one person running around on the lawn. So this lawn, the function is for walking, but for congregating and people sitting, they're doing that on the patio. So think about the use of spaces. Also, lawns use up a lot of energy for mowing. Unless you have an electric mower, the mowers spew fumes into the air. And intensive mowing can actually increase the amount of weeds and pests that you have actually in your lawn. So really, function. Ask yourself, what am I going to use the space for? And so just to reiterate how outdoor irrigation accounts for the most water use, I do irrigation plans where I do water calculations to see how much water is actually going to be used. And I wanted to compare an actual water budget calculation I did with what a standard sort of average home might use in a year for the interior. And so this 2015 report shows that a typical home is using about 46,521 gallons of water per year. I think that's actually a little low. If you look at the shower heads with 1 daily use and 4 occupants, probably more like 4 times. But, you know, it just shows you where the water use is going. So a lot of water for showering, kitchen faucets, a lot of water use there, toilets next, and then lavatory. Clothes washers, also somewhat less if you're doing about a load or so a day. And then, so I designed a irrigation system for a client, and I had to do, as part of the permit process, figure out what the budget was. And so we have 9 valves in this design with different, and they're broken down with different water uses. And so ignore all this. The major thing here is that there were 2 lawn areas, and the 2 lawn areas were using about 28,000 gallons, 28,539 gallons out of a total of 63,000 gallons of water per year. This is my estimate, even with all this other low, moderate, low water use. So the lawn is using this much water, or about 45% of the total irrigation water. So almost half, like they say, but it's only 19% of the landscaped area. So a tiny area is using up most of the water. So, and you know, you really don't think about how much water do I use in a year. If we add it all up, if this was an average house using 46,000 gallons of water a year, with the 63,000 gallons they're using on irrigation, which is more than the inside, that's over 100,000 gallons of water a year. That's a lot of water, with almost 58% of that going to irrigation. So let's get rid of that lawn. And so one of the easy ways that people can get rid of lawns is to do sheet mulching. And basically that means take sheets of cardboard, all those Amazon boxes that you might have piling up, let's put them to good use. And you can create planting beds. This is actually in my own backyard. I was creating a small vegetable garden back here. And so I put down some layers of wet cardboard and started putting down compost on the top, weighting it down, and so forth. And there are some other resources that show you how to get rid of your lawn. There's this lawntogarden.org, and this goes into a lot of detail to show you what the process is to sheet mulch, to really do it correctly. There's a little tab there. This is a screenshot from that, how to sheet mulch, how to maintain your garden, and so forth. Sheet mulching is great. It builds healthy soils. So if you put down these layers of cardboard right on top of the grass, you don't have to dig it up, which is work. And I'm all about reducing the amount of work I have to do. The cardboard smothers the grass, the topsoil is retained, the grass decomposes, feeds the soil organisms, and then you put a bunch of mulch on the top, and you can actually move the mulch aside and plant right down through that cardboard. Don't even have to wait for the grass to die. The last thing that you want to use is grass killing chemicals or dig up your sod to remove it. You know, this is really a lot of work, and these chemicals can get into the soil, and a lot of things live in the soil, and the chemicals can affect hormonal development of certain insects. And 70% of native bees actually nest in the ground. So, you know, spraying the grass means it's going to go into the soil, and it's going to possibly affect those organisms in the soil. So what are some alternatives? Okay, let's assume that you want to be able to walk on a surface um, like you would grass. Okay, so walkable areas. Easiest do-it-yourself way to do that is just put down mulch. Functions the same. You can walk on it just like grass. You can have the dogs poop on it and it won't kill the grass because it's already gone. You can play on it. You know, basically it has all the same functions as a lawn, but without the maintenance, without the mowing, and without the water. And it's good for the soil, and it can be really attractive. This is a very nice decorative mulch that I like to use. I call it decorative, although it is functional because it's these little tiny bark chips. Gives a very nice kind of uniform surface that looks tidy, but the soil likes it as it's breaking down. It sort of feeds the soil and helps retain moisture in the soil and really just helps native plants. Any of my neighbors who are watching will recognize this garden just down the street from me. My neighbor is allowing me to transform her yard with all of my extra native plants and goodies that I have. But we did recently put down this nice layer of mulch here in preparation for the rain to kind of get the soil ready so the soil doesn't wash away, and just really kind of give that nice finished look. So super easy. Anybody can do this.
Hey, Juanita, on that mulch, we have a couple of questions, if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
I don't
Yeah,
mind.
so one question is, can you talk about mulch and fire risk?
Okay, yeah. So let me go back to that slide. So this, you know, it is made out of wood, and you know, anything that's woody will burn. A small chunk like that is better than something that's something like gorilla hair mulch, which is actually finer and more feathery, which is more like kindling. This is not so much like kindling. So I always like to get like the chunks of bark chunks rather than something like gorilla hair, which is, you know, kind of looks very flammable. And if people are worried about if the mulch is going to catch on fire, wet it down with a spray from the hose, you know, once a week so that there's some moisture in it, and it'll make it more difficult to catch on fire. Um, you know, and you know, but really anything that's woody like this, there's always a fire risk with all of this, but you know, being able to just kind of wet it down, you know, once a week or something with just a quick spritz should really take care of some of those issues.
Great. And then, do you want to do one more question or should we move on?
Oh no, I can talk some more about mulch.
Okay, we'll do one more question, but just as a reminder, if folks can also put the questions in the Q&A, there's a function where you can also upvote other questions. And so if we don't get to them during the speaking portion, we'll definitely get to them during the Q&A. But I'll just do one more question and then we can move on afterwards. So could you talk about where to get mulch?
Yes, so this particular mulch was obtained from Lingso. It's a great mulch. It's their most costly mulch, but they also have another mulch called their premium arbor mulch, which isn't as pretty, but it's really actually very good for the soil. So garden centers, if you just have a small bed, you can get bags of mulch from any sort of nursery center, Home Depot, you know, those any place with a garden center, you can get it. For this particular garden, because it was so large, we had mulch delivered to the house, and then the gardeners spread it for us. And I think we got like 5 yards of mulch here. And they also, at most places like Lingso on their website, they have a calculator. So if you know the square footage of your area and about how thick the mulch should be, then you can calculate about how much you need in terms of cubic yards. And so this was, I told them to put down 2 inches of mulch here, which is plenty. And that was 5 yards for this yard. Any other pressing mulch questions?
There is one more, if you don't mind. Okay, and then I promise we'll move on. Do weeds grow through the mulch?
Yes, they can grow through mulch, but weeds can grow pretty much anywhere. I've seen weeds come up through artificial turf, which kills me because it's really just like it's like not helping. But yes, but they're actually easier to pull out because to get through the cardboard and the layers of mulch, if you sheet mulched, they're going to be a little bit more weak, and so pulling them out shouldn't be as hard. And the soil will be nicer and it'll be looser, so it'll be easier to pull them out. But yeah, I mean, weeds will come up pretty much anywhere, but with the sheet mulching, that will actually help with weeds, and then going forward, keeping the weeds out of the mulch is relatively easy because it is pretty loose. Okay, so another option that you want to use, that you might want to use if you want walkable space that doesn't use water, you can still play on it, have the kids run around, dogs poop on it, this is a big thing, and all that stuff, have gatherings, is to use decomposed granite, which is these, it's not pebbles, but it's like crushed granite. So it's like there's some stone dust as well as like 1/4 inch chunks of gravel that are very angular, so it doesn't move around very much. And that can take the place of grass, and you get the same kind of thing. A big kind of open uniform area where you can walk around. And if you don't like to walk on gravel in your bare feet, you can put in these nice stepping stones. And that's, people like to go barefoot outside. It's nice and smooth to walk on. So that's another option. Water can still get drained down through this, so it's still permeable, much like the mulch. So you're not getting a lot of runoff, you're getting infiltration. So that's another option. Again, another nice uniform look. And weeds can come up through this, but it's kind of a struggle for some plants to do that. You just pull them out as they come up. So another option, and really there's really nobody who can't do this, get an indoor-outdoor rug. If your function is to be able to walk barefoot outside in a large area, you don't want to walk on gravel, you don't want to spend the money for stepping stones, and you don't want to walk barefoot in mulch, indoor-outdoor rugs provide, a really flexible way of creating a space in which to walk, to hang out barefoot, and they define spaces really nicely. And so you can get, just these really nice rugs of various sizes, as big as you need, as small as you need, as many as you want. And, during the rainy season, you can roll them up and put them away. And then in the summertime, bring them out. And, you still have the same function as grass without all the expense of the the gardeners, the water, the fumes. All right, but if you really have to have a lawn, one thing that you can do is to plant native grasses. And here in California, we have a lot of native grasses. And this is a company that sells native grass in sod form. This is Delta Bluegrass, one of my favorite places to go for sod. And on this side, this is a blend called Native Mow Free, which has Idaho fescue, some Malate fescue, and so forth. So it's a fescue blend. I don't have to mow it that often, so that helps. Or you can try this Agrostis palens, which is a warm season grass. Looks just like regular grass, but uses about 1/3 as much water. So that's another great way to go. And if you don't want to spend the money on sod, it's available as seed, and you can get the seed from a variety of places. So a couple of easy things to do. I'm actually incorporating seed into my own front yard to kind of get this. I have a very small area of grass with this kind of fluffy look. And then I'm working in other plants in between the grass to get more of a meadow look. It may not be entirely a do-it-yourselfer thing. That might take a little bit more research and help, but you can get this really soft, beautiful look, either as a do-it-yourself project or engage with a contractor to do that. We'll talk about how to do that closer to the end. So a couple of other looks at what native bunch grasses look like, and we call them bunch grasses because they grow in a bunch. They don't necessarily spread out by runners, and so you can get, again, a lot of nice different looks here for kind of more of a little bit of a rustic look, and then movement through the space is done by stepping stones in awkward spots between the street and the sidewalk. If you want to put grass in there still, you can do nice bunch grasses. And I will confess, this is a non-native ground cover, which is a non-native elfin thyme that I have in my own home garden, although I'm transitioning this plant out with some other things. But this also gives a nice uniform look in between stepping stones, just kind of makes it look very carpety, and you can still walk through here with bare feet. This is actually going back out to our jacuzzi area. So a lot of bare feet back there. Okay, so if you're not walking on your lawn, but you want that uniform look, just a big swath of green, a lot of ground covers that are California natives that use almost no water. And so some examples of this big swath of green, you have this one here is Cenotes horizontalis, Yankee point. Evergreen, which means it stays green and nice looking all year long. Gets to be about 15 inches tall. In the spring, it has these beautiful blue blossoms. The leaves are glossy, so it doesn't look dry and desiccated. It stays like this nice green look all year. And with like maybe watering every month once during the summertime. So really a good option for places that there's really no reason to put lawn here because, are you walking through there? Are you, hopefully the dogs aren't pooping too much there, but another walkable native plant that's an alternative to lawn is Achilles Millifolium. This is semi-evergreen, so it looks a little greener in the spring. And during the really dry times, like right now, it looks a little bit drier. It spreads by runners. It can be mown down, and it has a variety of colors. So the blossoms come in red and the pink and white, and it does really well in sun or part shade. So a great thing, and it just is kind of fluffy and airy and very fresh looking. Another option, so many options, is Prageriavaska, which is our native strawberry. Oh, my PC needs to be plugged in. Maybe that was something I forgot to do. Here. Bear with me for a second here. I have about 1 million things plugged in over here. All right. But I forgot this one. All right. Never mind. There we go. Plug that in. Okay. There we go. That's better. Yes, strawberries. Who doesn't like strawberries? So another great native plant that we have spreads by runners. The fruit is tasty. It tastes like candy. It's like this really intense strawberry flavor. Nice glossy leaves, looks good year round. And, you can have some stepping stones and a nice feature here. So really no reason to use a grass here when you can have tasty strawberries. You can do some sun or shade or partly shade or mostly shade. It does pretty well. Another example for a big green swath in this plant is at our primrose garden. This is Salvia bees Bliss. And this gets to be about 12 inches tall. It's evergreen. It's extremely fragrant. And it's really fast growing. And it will get to be about 8 feet across in 2 years. And this plant just does not want to stop. It will keep expanding. And if we didn't shear it back from the edge here, I think it would just grow right out into the street. So another great option for a ground cover. Another one is Clenopodium douglasii, kind of more of a viney plant that you can just give almost no water to. A minty taste to it, very low sun and shade, but mostly likes the shady areas best. Now you're going, okay, so what do I plant? Those are some options, but what else do I have? Now, I'm a big native plant lover, and my place that I go to for my go-to for answers about what to plant is Calscape, and this is done by the California Native Plant Society. And this is a searchable database, provides you all kinds of information and resources. You can find California native plants and then create a plant palette of anything from trees, shrubs, and so forth. And here in California, we have 7,990 plants native to California, and they break it down for you. All plants, trees, shrubs, perennials, annuals, grasses, and I think it says 646 native grasses, so lots to choose from there, and so on and so forth. And you can search by what grows locally to your area. Just a really great resource, and it's free. The California Native Plant Society people are really on this, and they give you a planting guide, which gives you really in-depth information into how to water, how to maintain and plant things. Just has all the information that you need. Nurseries, where to find these plants. So people always say, where do you get your stuff from? It's like, wherever I can find them. And so if you see a plant that on here that you really like, you can find the nurseries that might have that in their inventory. Go to those websites, look at their inventory sheets. If they have it, then you're golden. And you can set up Excel spreadsheets with your plant list so you can keep track of everything. And then this very intriguing section, butterflies. What's that about? So what is that about? It's about food. Instead of asking sometimes what to plant, I always ask myself, who do you feed? And as Jennifer mentioned, I do have a PhD in biopsychology, and my area of expertise was ingestive behavior, eating and drinking. And so naturally, I'm asking myself, okay, what's going to be eating the plants? And we know that pollinators, of course, need plants to survive and everything like that. But we also know that when you have these native plants, they develop varieties so that you can get like different forms of a plant, like with pink flowers, like light pink flowers, and then white flowers. So there's a lot of variation in a plant over time. But how does that happen? Well, when bees spread pollen around, they're spreading genetic material. And that sort of speciation, the variation in a group of plants, happens more rapidly when you have those pollinators actively moving the genes around. With wind pollinated plants, it doesn't happen as fast because it's very random. And what that tells us then is these biological factors that interact might be more important considerations for determining what to plant than other factors, abiotic factors like climate and water and soil. So always consider the organisms that are eating the plants. So Calscape notes that we have 1,368 species of butterflies and moths native to California. What are butterflies? What's a butterfly before it's a butterfly? It's a caterpillar, and a caterpillar is food for birds. So you're gonna, if you plant native plants, you're gonna have butterflies and moths. And I just did this for San Mateo County, but in San Mateo County, we have 83 butterflies and moth species. So there's going to be a lot of hungry denizens out there that will find your food when you plant these plants. Now, if you really want to know how much water a plant uses, so you've picked out some plants and you're trying to figure out, okay, is this a low water plant? Is it a high water, because what does that mean exactly? So there's a handy website the water use classification of landscape species, online searchable database, free to use, where you can look at plants that are ranked on their water use depending on, and they rank it against as like lawn being 100%, and then everything is like ranked below that. So, and the percentages they call plant factors, when it's really, if you consider the high use being like a lawn is 100%, and then medium is like 40 to 60%, low water 20 to 30%, and very low water 0 to 10% of what a lawn would use. So that's how you can really determine if you're really like squeezing every drop out of your irrigation, really to look for those very low and low water use plants, and to only use like 1/10 of the amount that you would normally use on your lawn. Now, once you've picked out your plants, we can talk a little bit about plant layout. If you're going to plant and not just do mulch or decomposed granite, but you're okay, I'm taking out the lawn, I'm going to plant some plants. I'm not going to do anything that I'm going to walk on. So how do I space them out? Now, when you're doing a planting plan and deciding where to put the plants, use some graph paper, and each of those little squares on the graph can equal 1 foot. So measure your space, transfer that to your graph paper, and then from your plant palette, look and see what the mature diameter is of a plant, and then draw in those plants as circles. And then this helps you space things out. You notice that some are overlapping about 25%, others are just touching. This is how you space them out. Remember, when you plant plants, they're little to start with, but they can really get huge. And so if you cram everything too close together, you're going to end up with a jungle. And this is also a really good way to determine how many plants you're going to need. So of this particular group, we have 7 going along here and so forth. So a plan saves you money because you know exactly what you need, and you can make plans. You can decide, okay, I'm going to plant the big things first, which is what you always should do, and then plant the smaller things and smaller things that you can fit in between as you go. Big stuff first, and then smaller stuff later. California native plants, so great. California is a biodiversity hotspot. We have, of course, almost 8,000 species of plants, like I mentioned before, some found nowhere else on the planet, and more than any other state in the United States. Many of them are drought tolerant, meaning they're very adapted to our low rain during the summertime and early fall. And we also have 1,600 species of native bees, more than any other state in the United States. 4,000 species across the US that are native of bees. Honeybees are not native, so we're not going to talk about them. And we have such a huge number of plants because of these unique ecosystems that we have in California, everything from coastal areas to redwood forests to deserts, oak chaparral, and the native bees moving things around. So we really have everything here. And so these are all, again, pictures that I've taken, just showing in our gardens, we just have a plethora of native species that visit our gardens. It makes it very pleasant to be out there. So about plants, remember, form follows function. So let's talk about the functions, the actual functions of plants. So plants are the primary producers of food. They take energy from the sun, okay, and it comes down to earth in photons, and plants take those photons and convert it into food, into which animals, insects, specifically butterfly, moth larvae, and other insects that go through the larval stages, turn it into protein. And that protein then gets fed into baby birds. And so this is how it works. This is like the only real way to get that sun's energy into the food chain efficiently. And the reason why we really push native plants is because insects are picky eaters. They won't just eat anything. So those non-native plants aren't going to be so tasty to our native insects. They're going to be like, what is this? I don't want this. I want something native because I like those chemicals very specifically in that plant. And so that's the rule rather than the exception, is that they will eat those plants, become fat, juicy caterpillars, and then those caterpillars get turned into baby birds. So because plants then are food, they're not really decorations. They are decorative. I mean, plants are pretty, they're fragrant, they have beautiful blossoms, glossy leaves and stuff, but they are food. This is their actual function, which means that when you're adding those native plants in your garden, that you will attract native pollinators as well as other insects, and in turn birds. So you are attracting life to your garden with these plants. And the native plants become critical to sustain bird populations and other animals that rely on insect meals. It's important to see native plants as food because your plants will attract a variety of pollinators and other insects. So it is best to avoid making your garden an ecological sink or trap. So but I'm going to talk about an ecological trap, which is, or a sink. Actually, this is incorrect. It should say trap here. An ecological trap is something in the environment that attracts the organism. And because of that attraction, makes it easier for them to be killed through predation and other means. So we are bringing those insects in, but we don't want to kill them off with pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, mowing down things, night lights attracting moths, making it easier for them to be killed by other organisms. And so like an ecological sink is if you have two environments, one that's really good and one that's not so good, for whatever reason, insects from this first environment will go into that sink. And basically it's not a good place for them, and so it won't really help that species, and it becomes like a place where they go to die. We don't want your garden to be that. So to really get the best function out of your plants, remember that they're food, and know that you're setting a great buffet for the rest of the food chain. Now, I know it seems like a lot, and some of the do-it-yourselfers are probably going, how do I get professional help? Well, there's a lot out there, and it's good to get some input on these things to get really the most bang for your buck in terms of your time that you spend on making these changes. So I'm going to briefly talk about the difference between some of these terms: architects, landscape designers, landscape contractors, landscapers, gardeners. What do they all do? They all do slightly different things is the answer. So if we look at the difference between, I'm just going to take the big three here. What is landscape architecture? So like me, I got a degree in it. You are required to get a degree if you want to become a landscape architect. I'm licensed. The test wasn't easy, but that's what it takes to get a license. So a landscape architect is a protected professional designation. We do larger and smaller projects that include construction drawings. So if you want a good dimensioned drawing that shows exactly how to build something, what the finishes are, what the colors are, all that stuff for the hardscape and those built elements, you want a landscape architect to do those things. Now, if you just maybe want to do some softscape like plantings, you can use a landscape designer. To call yourself a landscape designer, you don't need a degree, you're not licensed, and you don't get construction drawings or anything like that for the built elements. So it depends on what your goals are, who you would like to do, who you'd like to use for designing your space. And then landscape contractors, who are they? They are the people who install things. Most landscape contractors, unless they do some kind of design build thing, do not design, they install. So they will take a design from a landscape architect or landscape designer and they install it. Sometimes they have a design build aspect to it, others not. Also, to become a contractor, you don't need a degree for that. but they are licensed and insured. So, and I always recommend people to use a licensed contractor to install things because of liability issues. It's just better that way. You kind of get what you pay for. Landscapers and gardeners may not have the right experience for doing these sorts of things. Again, it's what is your level of like what you want to do in your landscape if you're looking to replace hardscape, irrigation, things like that. It's best to go for the professional, really good professional help on that. Now, a native garden is easier to take care of than a non-native garden. I should say it's less maintenance. I think it's easier too, because you're not mowing, you're not watering as often. Basically the main thing is just to keep the weeds at bay. And most weeds don't come up during the hot, dry months when it's unpleasant to be outside in the dirt. When you plant things, again, refer to the Calscape website for really in-depth information. But when you first plant things, irrigate them to establish them, maybe once or twice a week. Irrigation should encourage the roots to search for water. So just outside the root ball, not on top of the root ball itself, because that will tend to rot things out. I prune sparingly to control dried up dead things, so for fire safety, and also to keep branches out of pathways and whacking me in the head as I go by. You don't need to fertilize. The native plants really don't like fertilizer. And if your soil is kind of heavy, I always say use some cactus mix or a good sort of California blend to really kind of loosen it up if you need to. Mulch to control those weeds initially. And in my own home garden, I like to mulch with leaves that I have, because it's not that I'm lazy exactly, but I know that leaves promote good fungal growth underground, and the fungus are what help the roots establish in the ground. And then, so my yard might look a little bit messy, but other people can put a layer of bark chips on the top just to give that uniform look, and you have that nice sort of lasagna of wood chips and then a layer of leaves underneath that break down and allow any sort of organisms that are overwintering to hang out before they turn into butterflies in the spring. You can leave areas of bare dirt for nests for native bees so they can get in there. Don't use leaf blowers in your planted areas because, again, you have organisms. Remember, plants are food, and so you are going to have these great organisms inhabiting. The birds will come and get them. So if you need to use a leaf blower, try to use an electrically powered blower on hardscape areas like patios and driveways. And again, don't use pesticides, herbicides, or fungicides. There's really no reason to do that, especially as you start to add more and more plants. If you're going the plant route, you invite insects to come and eat, but remember, every insect is something else's meal, and that includes predator insects like that dragonfly. So people say, well, what if I end up with too many bad insects? That means you need to add more plants to get a variety of insect species in there, and they will all fight and kill each other and eat each other, because that's what they do. It's really kind of scary. If you're an insect, that is. So again, avoid creating that trap, remember, where you're inviting things in, but then you can't sustain them because of things that will kill them. So for example, a window that doesn't have any curtains where the light is spewing outside, those moths that are attracted by the light, you can, at a outdoor light or a window like this, it can kill up to 60% of the insects that are attracted to that window that night. So again, don't invite them over just to kill them. Other ways to reduce, or to optimize, to make your garden better for these organisms that will come, is to try to connect planting beds together so that there's a little corridor so they can go back and forth. reducing that light pollution at night. And it's not just insects that are affected by that, but other organisms that do things at night, leaving those leaves, and then eliminating the use of pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides, and then reducing as much gasoline exhaust as possible, because those insects use smell to find their way around. So again, just a few things that really, you're doing the right thing by planting natives. Now let's make sure that we really optimize those plants for the organisms that use them. And then lastly, what happens when you transform your garden and you start using less water, but you maybe have more native plants in there. And so among the other ecosystem services that you get from the plants and the money that you're going to save on water, the money that you're going to save on maintenance, the more that you'll start to see these interrelationships in nature, and you learn how to optimize the productivity of your native plant garden, and that will lead to an abundance of life. And I think when you have that abundance, that leads to the enhancement or the abundance of appreciation for your role in caring for nature's complex beauty, because you can do this. You can have abundance and enjoy the beauty. And with that, I would be happy to take any sort of questions.
Wow, thank you so much, Juanita. That was incredible and such beautiful photos too.
Thank you.
Yeah, we do have a few questions here. So Jay Fould asks, what about mulching and gravel and gophers? I put down mulch and the gophers made a big mess. What can I do?
So there are a couple of ways to handle gophers. And so one way that you might handle them, remember that those gophers are somebody else's meal. And so how do you invite things in that will eat them, like raptors? You can put up a perch for the raptors to perch and sit and wait to dive down and get those creatures. And if they're eating plants and things like that, what I suggest to people is to maybe provide a barrier underground with either chicken wire baskets or some kind of mesh, metal mesh, that they can't get to the roots. Nature finds ways to annoy us in the garden. Sometimes they send these creatures to do these things, but the moles are going in there, they're kind of churning up the soil, they're looking for grubs, which is what they like to eat. And so that you have insects living underground if you have moles, because it is a big food chain. And so you want to maybe encourage the predators to come in and get them. So encourage the predators by providing perches for them.
That's great, thank you. So our next question comes from Julie, and she asks, can you get clover sod? I'm not sure, yeah.
Clover sod, I've not run into clover sod specifically. Clover is a really great pollinator plant. And we do have, I know of at least one perennial clover that we have. But I think most of the other clovers are annuals. And I always add some seeds of clover to my own garden to get it to grow. And clover is also very attractive to snails and slugs. So the only thing I use to get rid of these slugs and snails is I use Sluggo, which is actually a natural chemical. It's like iron sulfate or something, I forget exactly, that occurs naturally in soil, but that's the only thing I can use to keep slugs from eating my clovers. And so I don't believe that the perennial clovers are in sod form. And clovers tend, like the perennial one that I have in my garden, I keep it in the wetter area of my garden. So they're not exactly really super drought resistant plant. But the annual plants certainly are good to try during the spring. And I would definitely recommend trying some of those clover seeds for the springtime. But just remember that those are annuals.
Great, so exciting. Thank you. And then our next question comes from Angela, and she asks, could you send the plant list from your slides? Maybe perhaps in the PowerPoint. We could send that over after the presentation. Would you be okay with that?
Yeah, that would be great.
Great. Yeah, we'll set that up, Angela. Thank you. Our next question comes from Tracy, and she asks, what lawn alternative do you recommend for an area where my dog can use for potty and run around on?
So, dogs, their products outside, the urine and the feces actually are not good for plants. So some kind of a non-plant alternative. It's probably going to have to be either bark chips or decomposed granite for a space for them to do their business, because there aren't really any plants that are going to hold up really well to those waste products from dogs.
Great, thank you. And then another question, where can I get milkweed plants for monarchs?
So many of the native plant nurseries that I go to have milkweed of various types. And, if you go to Calscape, you can look up milkweed, see which species that you want to use. There are a couple of different kinds that grow here in the peninsula area, and just take a look at, see, okay, it's like these 5 nurseries have it. Click on the nursery website, go through their inventory list to see if they have it in stock. And then, either some places you can order it online and then just go pick it up. Other places, I think they do in-person sales. It really, you're just going to have to research the various nurseries that might have it.
Wonderful. The next question is, what do you recommend as best ground cover that is easy to rake for an area where lots of leaves fall? I know you said it's okay to have leaves decompose, but if we want to rake away.
Yeah, so the plants that work pretty well, so good ground covers, like those native bunch grasses, certainly that's pretty easy to rake through. And sort of, if you have a small space, maybe a small scale ground cover like the native strawberries, or something like, in another place in my garden, I have what's called skullcap, which is a ground cover, but it kind of goes a little bit dormant at the end of the summer. And I can rake everything off before the new growth starts in the spring. Other plants that might work would be like maybe a ground cover Arctostaphylos that you can rake in between the plants and then just pick the leaves out of the plant by hand. So really anything like a small ground cover you can go through and you can kind of pick out things by hand and then just rake out around them. There are other smaller ground covers. It depends on how tough the plants are, if you want to actually rake on top of the plants. The grasses, of course, are great for that sort of thing. But for the other kinds of ground covery plants, where a lot of leaves fall, sometimes I will let the leaves stay on top of the plants because the leaves actually will decompose if there's not a ton of them. Otherwise, I'll pick them off the top of the plant and just kind of leave them lying around. But in the places that I want the leaves off completely are places like that I have some grass or some lower ground covers. And I actually don't use a big rake. I can use a little hand rake that's about this long and just rake it out by hand. Wonderful.
Thank you. That's great advice. Another question is, one of the requirements to get a water rebate is to plant at least one tree on my lawn. What kind of small tree would you recommend?
Ooh, small tree. So I have a current list of favorite small trees. And if it's a really sunny spot, some of the bigger Arctostaphylus, the bigger manzanitas, are super great. They have these big fat evergreen leaves. The big berry manzanita is a nice one if it's a hot and sunny spot. Also the toyon, the heteromeles arbudifolia, another evergreen plant that grows pretty quickly, has a nice white flower in the spring, red berries because, you know, Hollywood. And it's kind of a sun shade area. One of my current favorites is the Cercocarpus betuloides, or the mountain mahogany. And that's another evergreen one, and that stays green all year long. It's a great habitat plant. If you have a nice sunny area, again, the scrub oak, if you don't want a big size oak, you can put a scrub oak in there. That's another good one. Prunus ilicifolia, the native cherry, is a good one. That's a nice small evergreen tree. And the prunus species are really great for habitat as well. A lot of insects use those to make caterpillars, grow some caterpillars from those. So those are a few of my current favorites. I have some others that I like to try. If you want kind of a fruiting tree, and you have a shady spot, a nice one, and actually plant two, are the hazelnuts, because you know, who doesn't like hazelnuts? And they are male and female though, so you need at least two, but they are not evergreen, and it takes a while to for them to grow. They're a little slow, but they make a nice understory tree in the shade. So lots of different options. It really depends on what your situation is.
Beautiful, beautiful. Our next question is, can you comment on pros and cons of artificial turf?
Pros, it's green. It doesn't use any water. I'm really trying here. Cons, it really doesn't stop weeds, because I've seen weeds grow right up through that. It's plastic, so you're using you know, petroleum-based products to create it. It heats up the soil underneath, so it's going to kill all the organisms that live underneath of it, and native bees won't be able to get through it to nest. And it does heat up during the day, and it doesn't stay clean, as you might think. And you know, when you go to dispose of it, it goes into the landfill. You really can't recycle it, and it doesn't. In that space where you could be, you know, repairing nature, you're basically taking away space where, you know, really you can leverage the power of biology. This is kind of the opposite of that. It's kind of taking away from the power of biology. Some people like it for various reasons, like putting greens and things like that. You know, a big swath of it, like in a huge yard, is kind of sad, because, you know, it's so easy to leverage biology to make things better. And this, used in the wrong way, I think can make it a lot worse.
Great, very good points. Our next question is, are there any free plants for native gardens? And also, are there any fire barrier plants?
Free plants, like, what does that mean exactly? Like, are people giving away plants?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe Jay Fould, if you could clarify, we can definitely come back to that part of the question.
Yes, and fire barrier plants, there's certainly things that might be more flammable than other things. There are plants that are recommended for what they call these wildland interfaces, where you're close to maybe some woody areas that might catch on fire. So fire barrier plants might be things like succulents, which are moist and juicy, so they don't catch on fire as easily as something that's drier or more oily, for example. But you know, free plants, let me just talk about that for a second. So plants are productive things. They give you lots of seeds, and some of them you can generate if you buy one plant. If you're kind of like on a budget, you can actually take cuttings from that plant and root them out and get a whole bunch more plants. So in a sense, those are a bunch of free plants. And seeds are super cheap as well. It's just a matter of investment of your time and remembering that each seed, when it turns into a plant, has to have a hole dug so that it can be placed, because seed packets have hundreds of seeds in them. And do you really want all of those plants? So, you know, seeds are about as close to free as possible because they do provide so many for a very small sum of money. But I don't know of any place that's actually giving away plants at the moment. Sometimes at the end of a season, I will have extra seedlings myself of things because like in our Gwenda Street garden, one of the white sages had babies, and I had 4 dozen white sage plants to give away. And that was a small part of the giveaway. So sometimes I have free plants. So I occasionally, if I do, I post that on my Instagram and Facebook pages. So watch this space for more.
That's great. Yeah. They did clarify programs to pick up starter plants for no cost. So
Yes.
would you? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, as citizens of the Republic, we should request that our cities and municipalities fund these programs. Maybe do a turn in your ivy for a free plant. I think that would be an awesome city sort of program. I'm just throwing that out there for an idea. I would love to see more of that myself. There are other places that do that, and I think that that would be super popular and an easy way to get native plants to people.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Great, thank you. So our next question is, any suggestions about what can be planted under orange trees and or persimmon trees?
So I have an orange tree in my own yard, and that thing always drops oranges, the rotting ones, the nasty ones. And so what I planted under those are bunch grasses, because you know it lands in the bunch of grass, and those bunch grasses actually have a really deep root system, so they direct water down into the roots where the orange tree roots are. So those are a good combination. And when the oranges drop, they don't break anything like branches or blossoms or anything like that. So that's kind of like a nice all-purpose kind of plant that goes under the oranges. Anything else, you know, like maybe the strawberry plants would work pretty well. Anything kind of with a like soft rather than a really woody stem, I think would work, because an orange, when it drops, is going to break a branch.
Interesting. Cool. Thank you. Great. So our next question is, what are your thoughts on planting redwood trees in the coastal environment?
Well, a redwood tree in the coastal environment, if it's in the right spot, it can be the perfect plant. But they do really like underground water. A mature tree can use up to something like 1,500 gallons a month, I think, something like that. So they can be very greedy with water. They like it a lot, and they also like to be in groups because they don't have a tap root. They have surface roots, and they hold each other up with those surface roots. But they do like that underground source of water, as well as like a nice foggy area. So because they actually strain water out of the air. And there is a real plant association with redwoods. Some people say, well, my redwoods are really struggling. And it's like, That's because they're like in this really sunny, dry area and you don't have rotting logs under them. They're not next to streams, they're not getting fog. So, you know, if you have the spot where they might grow naturally, I would, you know, redwoods are great, but they do get big. You know, they're not screen plants. And I actually had a client once who had a redwood tree in front of their front door that was 4 feet in diameter. So we had to build a porch around that thing. You know, I'm sure that, you know, it was planted as a cute sapling at some point in time, but they can grow quite rapidly and put on like over 1 inch in diameter per year. So, you know, again, siting things, making sure that you have the right space for them is really important. You don't want these things to struggle. You know, when you're planting something, really think about, is it going to be happy here? You know, do you want to just kind of hanging by its fingers, or do you really want it to be a happy part of the ecosystem and the plant community there?
Great. Yeah, redwoods are absolutely incredible.
Mhm.
Thank you for that. Our next question is, the house I have moved into has dead grass that wasn't watered for over a year. Can I just spread mulch on top, or do I need to prep the soil in any way before spreading mulch?
So you might have some weed seeds in that soil. I would definitely put down a layer of cardboard, but you know, you may not have to. Depending on the kind of grass it is, it may not come back. You know, you could do an experiment and do 1/2 with those cardboard sheets on one side and the other half just do mulch, see what happens. But to really be sure that the grass doesn't come back, the sheet mulching is the really good way to be sure and really prevent it.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much. And we do have about 15 minutes left, and we'd love to get to these last few questions. So the next one is, what is the best time of year in the Bay Area to plant a garden?
Right now, planting season has started. I like to plant things when the weather starts getting cooler, because the soil is cooler. And when you try to plant things during the summertime, your soil is going to be warm. And then if you add water to establish the plants, you're going to end up with warm, moist soil, which can encourage pathogens. It's just harder for the plants. But if you start planting now, supposedly it's going to rain in a week, I looked. So planting season is on us. So I've been out planting things, and you can I plant things all the way up until about the beginning or end of June, depending on how hot it is and my level of motivation. But really during the rainy season, during the cooler months, when it's, you know, the water's not evaporating so quickly because it's cold, that's the best time, because then the roots can establish in that cool, moist soil. They can meet up with the mycorrhiza, the fungus underground, and the roots and the mycorrhiza get together and they share nutrients. And then when spring starts, those roots are really in there, and then the top growth just explodes. So planting season has been declared open. Go for it.
That's awesome. So exciting. Yeah, that's good to know, because I think I'm going to start up a garden also. So that is good to know.
Good.
So the next question is, are oak chips good to use for mulch?
Sure. Yeah, just about really any sort of organic material, other than things like maybe eucalyptus, which has a chemical in it that other plants don't like. And I think also maybe walnut trees also have something in their bark that other things don't like, but I don't see why you couldn't use oak chips.
Great, great. The next question is, what edibles are good to put into a water-wise garden?
Ooh. So as I mentioned before, the hazelnut tree, um, and trees are great for a lot of different reasons. And the hazelnuts do need a little extra water in a shady location, but they will share water with other plants. Other edible things to put in. So I'm a big fan of the strawberries. Um, but other things too, like the native blackberry is a great habitat plant. Um, the uh, the native thimbleberry, which is kind of like our native raspberry. There's a blackcap raspberry as well that has thorny canes, but is super tasty. So these are things that are interesting to plant. It really depends on what do you want to eat. um, and let's see, what other edibles do I like? The hazelnuts are my favorite right now, and the strawberries, of course, as well. Oh, yes, Vaccinium ovatum, the native huckleberry, hands down, easy, easy, easy. I have some that are full sun most of the day and then shade in the afternoon. They get watered about once a week, really deep. Evergreen and the huckleberries are basically like little tiny blueberries, so super intense flavor, dark black, blackish blue. And you can harvest these things and make a nice cordial with vodka with them. That's very tasty as well. Or you can eat them plain over ice cream. You can freeze them. So huckleberries, just they can be quite abundant. And they're a huge favorite with the pollinators, especially bumblebees.
That's incredible. Yeah, sounds really tasty.
It is.
I'm excited to try that. Great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for the great questions. So now I'm going to hand it off to Jennifer again for our poll.
Yeah, so I just launched a poll again. They're the exact same pair of questions from the beginning. And yeah, we are just curious to hear, are you feeling inspired after this talk? Do you feel that you can conquer sheet mulching or, know at least the next steps of how to remove your lawn? Or maybe you feel that, this is a big undertaking and you want to hire outside help. Yeah, let us know what you're thinking. So I see about 78% of participants are attending or have filled it out. So I'll give it maybe 10 more seconds. All right. And I will close the poll now. All right, so here are the results. So wow, a lot more people I think are going to be doing it themselves. Let me just pull up that's why I took a screenshot of our first one. Let's see. Yeah, so before this workshop, we had about 45% of attendees saying that they would hire outside help. Now that's down to 28%. That's great. And then when asked how likely are you to replace all or part of your turf lawn, about 84% said very likely or somewhat likely. And now we have a little bit more people now, very likely or somewhat likely. And that's great to see that no one selected the not at all likely. All right. Let's see. So we still have 6 minutes left. Alexandra, were there any other questions that we missed?
Yeah, there's one here. It says, it's from Allison, and she asks, if we sheet mulch now, do we need to wait an entire year before planting?
Oh, absolutely not. You can plant right away. And this gives you the appearance of the finished garden. So basically, you can push the mulch away where you're going to plant, kind of cut a hole into the cardboard and dig a hole where you want your plant. and just plant right in there, and you're golden. And that's the really great thing about sheet mulching, is like it's an instant planting bed created. You can plant right away, because the plant that you plant will be above the cardboard and the mulch, while everything that's underneath, like the grass, is going to die. And so that plant will live, and everything else will be, out of sight, out of mind, and eaten by the worms and other insects. So yeah, no, you do not have to wait. You can just go right for it.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I really like that lasagna metaphor reference that you had for the layers. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Jennifer?
Yeah, so let's see. With that, why don't we go, oh wait, did we get the question about the ivy?
Oh, got it. Perfect. Thank you. So it says, I have so much ivy. How do I get rid of it, and will it come back? My lawn had been dead since the last drought, and it's quite big. So I was thinking of veggie beds incorporated into a native garden. Thoughts?
Right. So ivy is a great scourge upon us in this town of Palo Alto. And I actually have ivy growing on 2 of my backyard fences. And that stuff is literally like, the trunks are about 6 inches thick, and it's destroyed part of my fences. The best way to get rid of it is to hire outside help. You need people who have the right tools to get in there and remove it, and to grub out the roots, and to go full ham on it and just get rid of it. I've been trying to get rid of it myself for years, and I just, as one lone woman with a pair of pruners or shears, or I don't have the right tools, I don't have the right expertise, and quite frankly, I don't like to get that dirty. So for me, it was worth it just to have a team come in, and I just bit the bullet, spent the money, and got them to get rid of it. And this looks so good without it. And what I found about ivy, at least in 2 of our gardens where we had ivy, like the Gwynda Street garden, we had it professionally removed. We put mulch down on the top. And the first year for that garden, it kept popping up in places, and we weeded out by hand. But that goes away if you just keep on top of it and weed out any little handfuls that come back. Ivy is kind of wimpy once you yank out the big roots. And you can win the ivy war at the Island Drive garden that we did in 2017, completely covered in ivy. Now I think we get like a little sprig coming up, maybe two or three places, and that's a 4,000 square foot garden that was completely covered for decades. And so the short answer is, it mostly won't come back if you just pull out whatever decides to pop up after you have the big swath removed by the people with the really good tools. I always, gardening can be very physical. And for me, taking big loppers and trimming this stuff, I was getting nowhere. So hiring somebody to remove it, who does this all the time, has the tools, doesn't mind getting dirty, and you're paying them. That's the best way to go, in my opinion.
Great. Thank you. So we do have time for 2 questions. So this one is, what grows under a mature large oak, and can we use oak chips for mulch?
So yes, you can use oak chips for mulch. And you want to plant natives under an oak tree because they like native plants. It's actually better for them. People plant a variety of things, and there's actually a section on the Calscape site that has a list of things that grow nicely under oaks. One thing I like to plant under oaks is Monardella, which is Coyote Mint. And that grows very nicely under oaks. It has a nice purple flower, is very fragrant. Another one is the coyote bush, the Baccharis pilularis, the more ground covery one. That one is also very nice to grow underneath oak. That one stays evergreen all year long, has a nice white flower late in the summer, really pairs nicely underneath oaks. Other people plant hummingbird sage under oaks. There are a lot of different choices depending on, what colors that you want, what form of the plant, how you want it to smell. Hummingbird sage actually smells very nice. You can have sagey smell, you can have minty smell. I would just go to the Callscape site, look at the different plants, maybe go out and examine the plants out in any sort of like native plant gardens to see what they look like, see what they smell like, and then decide what you want.
Beautiful. Great. And then this last question is, how do you keep the mulch in place? It tends to spread into walkways.
I just, it spreads because people like scatter it when they're walking through it, or animals get in it. I just sweep it back into the garden with my broom.
Yeah,
just sweep it back.
I think that's fair. All right. And with that, it is around just about 8:30. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us in tonight's program. We will be sending a follow-up email to all attendees with the link to the resources that we mentioned. And we will also share a link of where you can find a copy of this recording if you want to rewatch it, or if you want to share it with anyone else who might be interested in converting their lawn. It'll take a few days for us to upload it onto YouTube, but it will be there afterwards. And with that, please join me in thanking Juanita for her lovely lecture, and hope to see you at one of our future workshops. Thanks, Juanita.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you. Great to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. You guys take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye.